Everybody, I'm Jeff Mayers from WizPolitics.com and WizBusiness.com, welcoming you to Miller Park, Milwaukee Brewers and baseball, economic recovery amid a pandemic. Thank you very much to our generous sponsors. This is part of our Milwaukee event series. I want to thank Bridge and Build, which is actually an organization that's trying to link sports to helping youth. The Firm Consulting, the Milwaukee Police Association, Waggett, 1125 at Pabst, Spectrum, Medical College of Wisconsin, and the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. So I want to bring in our panelists here, introduce our panelists. Rick Schlesinger, he's the president of business operations for the Milwaukee Brewers. Tim Sheehy, the president of the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce. Kelly Jo Golson, she's the chief marketing officer for Advocate Aurora Health. Thank you very much for coming on board, panelists. Now, I got to start with Rick. These are extraordinary times, Rick. I guess I don't have to tell you that. The baseball season shortened, and what happened in the last 24 hours because of the situation in Kenosha is truly unprecedented. Fill us in on what's going on with the Milwaukee Brewers, what happened yesterday, and what's likely to happen today.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me on. The reality is the players met before the game and unanimously elected to not play. I frankly think that their message was simple, that what's going on in Kenosha and frankly in society as a whole had to take precedence over the game last night. And they talked to the Reds players. The Reds players were in agreement with the approach, and the players decided to make a statement and not play. Obviously that came on the heels of the Bucks electing to not play their playoff game yesterday. The Bucks were sort of the lead team to sort of take this position. Obviously, there's a lot of connections between the Bucks players and the Brewers players, and from that dialogue led to the decision by our players, of which we're fully supportive. But obviously, a very extraordinary decision. These are extraordinary times, and we're seeing a lot of things this year that frankly I don't think any of us expected 6 months ago. And in unprecedented times, you see some interesting and innovative and challenging decisions. And frankly, not all of them are going to be popular or universally acclaimed, but we respect the players' decision here. And in these extraordinary times, we support what they did.
So will there be baseball today?
As of now, we are scheduled for a doubleheader, which will be the first doubleheader in Miller Park history. So that is on the schedule. We have every intention that the games will be going forward. And that's the plan. I believe from what I hear is the NBA is going to resume their season, their playoffs tomorrow. So I think at least of right now, Jeff, the plan is for us to play a doubleheader, resume our season. And that's the latest we have.
Yeah, we're here to talk about Miller Park and economic development and all that. But you can't help but at this moment in time, Rick, I just want to stay with you for the moment about this connection between sports and society. I don't think it's ever been greater.
I think that's right. I think, baseball, frankly, has sort of an interesting history with social justice and issues relating to our country, with Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier, April 15th, 1947. Commissioner Selig, longtime owner of the Brewers and commissioner, who has, always said baseball is a social institution, and it not only has to reflect society, but it has to, work with society and promote society issues and values and be a leader. And obviously, we understand this is a very divided, polarized country, but I think we can all agree that we want social justice. We want equality. We want every American, every person who's in this country to feel, they have an equal chance and equal rights and equal opportunities. And there is certainly a sense in the country that we have some room to go. There is a discord between the values of their country espoused and the practical realities. And I think baseball and sports, frankly, are taking a leadership role. And again, we get it. It's not going to please everybody, and everybody has views. There are some people who believe that sports and politics should not mix. There are some that believe that, the team should be more active and more out in front. And we hear all the voices. So navigating this line, Jeff, is not easy. We're not looking at it through the lens of what is our commercial impact. We're looking at it a lens as we're part of a state, we're part of a city. Kenosha is 45 minutes from our front door. And what happens and the pain that people experience in our state in southeastern Wisconsin, we feel we're part of it. We live here. I've been a Wisconsin resident almost all my life. And so I share the pain and the heartache. And as an institution, as an organization, we hope to be in the equation, in the conversation. We're not overstating our role, but we have a platform and people look to sports teams for many things. They're now going to see sports teams and players, take on leadership roles in politics and issues in society, and that's probably not going to change.
Okay. Thank you, Rick, for that perspective. I want to go to Tim Sheehy now, the president of the MMAC. Tim, I mean, as I started off here, I mean, this week's been extraordinary, and it's you folks put out a statement last night recognizing, I think, how it's affecting the business community writ large. Maybe you can talk about your statement and talk about your personal feelings about all this.
Yeah, the statement, I think, is really reflective of the companies in the region, which have come together under the banner of a region of choice for all. I believe both the Brewers and Evan Aurora have signed on. So we've got over, I think, 110 companies that employ close to 145,000 people in the region that have made a statement about growing the diversity of their workforce and their management teams. And so I think the statements are important from everybody, but what we want to try to do is focus on the actions that we can take as a business community to make this community more attractive for all sorts of folks, make it a region of choice for all. And so that was really the emphasis of the statement and what's behind it. And again, I think as Rick mentioned, this is going to continue to be a defining characteristic both for companies, their culture, communities, and their culture. Can you be inclusive, open, equitable? And I think the regions and the companies that are successful doing that are the ones that are going to be more prosperous and more attractive going forward.
Yeah, and what about your personal feelings about this, Tim? I mean, you fought hard to keep Major League Baseball here, to keep the Brewers here. And so, again, this connection between society and sports and what's going on in Kenosha, I mean, you must have a lot of personal feelings about all that.
I actually think it's a great attribute for Milwaukee to be home to the Brewers, to be home to the Bucks, kind of to share in the Packers, and having those, global franchises located here, having the voice of the players, I think just adds a richness to the diversity in the community, and is an important part of what makes this a great place to live, work, play, and learn. So I really do think having these organizations anchored here in the community will help us in this instance see ourselves through a different lens.
Okay, let me bring in Kelly Jo Golson. She's the Chief Marketing Officer for Advocate Aurora Health. Welcome, Kelly Jo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What's your reflection on what's been going on this week? And because your organization is in a lot of these communities that are being affected.
I think, like I would share with Tim and Rick's comments, I think all of our hearts are heavy as we watch our community struggle. And one of the things we've talked about at Advocate Aurora is just the acknowledgement that our nation is facing two pandemics. One we've been battling since March, this thing called COVID-19, and one we've been battling since our nation was created. And I think we all have a role to play. At Advocate Aurora, we've been very clear that we deplore any type of racism, and that we absolutely see ourselves as being part of the solution and doubling down our efforts. And I think all of our role in underscoring our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is more important than ever. And we're committed to be a part of the solution. And I think we acknowledge that our country has a long way to go, as do we, but we're committed to roll up our sleeves and be about that work.
Yeah, and I think that all of your organizations, both seen and unseen, have programs promoting diversity and racial justice. But I guess I'm wondering, is this spurring you to think about what more you can do? Let's just start with you, Kelly Jo, on that.
So absolutely, I would frame our response has really been kind of a threefold reaction. First, I think it really starts with listening, of really understanding the pain, the suffering, the true issues at hand. So at Advocate Aurora, we've launched what we're calling a Real Talk series, where we are really engaging in real, candid, frankly uncomfortable conversation with our patients, with our team members, with our clinicians. So I think it always starts with that first step of truly listening and understanding. I would say we're focused in two other areas. The second is really building that workforce that's representative of the diverse communities that we serve. People of diverse races, backgrounds, cultures is truly a part of our DNA, and we need to make sure that our workforce reflects that. So you're seeing a lot of work across our organization, and the hiring, the partnering, and making sure that we're building that workforce. And the other area that we're really focused in is addressing those health disparities in the communities. And it's pretty, it's significant. And we certainly saw that with COVID, that our communities of color were disproportionately impacted. And so we've been rolling up our sleeves in everything from delivering care packages to those homes. We've got plans underway to deliver flu shots into some of those communities, partnering with many of the folks that are here on this call, and really rolling up our sleeves and making sure we're addressing those health gaps in those communities.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to Tim now. What about minority-owned businesses? What kind of things does MMAC do to help those, and maybe thinking about new ways to help them?
Well, I think we've really approached this in three buckets. And the first is, as Kelly Jo laid out, is helping companies collaborate on best practices as they recruit, advance, and retain diverse talent. And this is a case where I think companies can learn from one another, and it helps all boats rise in Milwaukee. And so what we want to do is make sure the region is an attractive place for diverse talent to come to. And I think companies can do that collectively. The second is in the K-16 pipeline. And I want to recognize the Brewers and their foundation for the contribution they've made. But as we talk on this program today, there are 23,000 students in the city of Milwaukee that lack access to hotspots and internet connections. And if you think about that, that's like a kid showing up to school saying, sorry, there's no seat in the classroom for you. So both through the Milwaukee Public Schools Foundation and through an effort of City Forward Collective, we want to make sure that those kids in MPS and outside of MPS get access to hotspots. That's part of closing that gap, because those kids, by and large, are Black and brown, low-income students. And we want to make sure that they're capable of connecting to learning as this school year goes forward. And then the third part is creating wealth in the community. And that happens through growing diverse entrepreneurship and through the supply chains of companies here in the region as they diversify those supply chains. And if we can kind of look at those three buckets with very specific action items, we'll improve this community as a place for all.
Yeah, Rick, you've talked a little bit, touched on this already, but I mean, your fan base is diverse, your team on the field is diverse, and this has to get you thinking about, bolstering some of what you already do through your vast resources in terms of community outreach.
Yeah, I mean, to echo what Kelly Jo said, I mean, we're spending a lot of time what we call listen and learning. We are, our entire organization has been having regular video Zoom calls with community leaders to understand sort of the perspectives on race and white privilege, social justice, learning the history of Milwaukee and its issues with race and challenges associated with that, the mix of poverty and race and what that means. And to Tim's point, we're really trying to look at making the Brewers an attractive destination for diverse employees. A couple of years ago, I went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. and spoke to some of the students. And one of the first questions I asked a group of 50 students was how many were thinking about careers in Major League Baseball. Not a single hand went up. And it's not like there isn't a team of some success in Washington, D.C. I know all too well from the last game of the 2019 season, regretfully. But this is an entity and an organization that, Major League Baseball has not really been considered an attractive destination for diverse people. It's known as, sort of a white male kind of bastion. And we need to make the Brewers in Major League Baseball attractive and showcase why working at a career in Major League Baseball is valuable to a person of a diverse background. And on the supply chain, one of the things that we're working with Tim and other organizations is really trying to nurture and foster the diverse suppliers. One of the things that we have realized, and frankly, probably a little late in the game, but it's not all about what the best price could possibly be for an item that we buy. And the Brewers certainly buy hundreds of thousands of dollars of products, from very different suppliers. Short term, a supplier that maybe is not the perfect price competitor could long-term be the best client for us. And sometimes we have to look at things and look at a longer view, and maybe a diverse supplier is somebody that we want to help invest in and nurture. We've done a little bit of that with our cleaning company. There's a lot more we can do.
Rick, I just want to stay with you now and sort of move on to the what you folks have been dealing with this year, a pandemic shortened season. What have you learned so far about running baseball during a time like this, during a health crisis?
Well, I guess the biggest lesson I've learned is all of my financial models that I put together in January and February are all completely useless. And the irony is we were working on, two things. I was working on a 3-year long-range plan, which I completed in January, which I gingerly looked at the other day and have to throw it out. And frankly, the other thing is we have to prepare for the unknown. And while nobody really, from our perspective, could prepare for a season like this, the reality is it's forced us to sort of relook at our business. And that means, in terms of staffing, in terms of how we're structured, in terms of how we communicate with our fans, this has really put a lot of pressure on us to still have engagement with our fan base. We are a business that relies heavily on the in-person experience. We are not a big television market. We generate most of our revenues from ticket sales, concessions, parking, retail, and all of that has been wiped away by something completely out of our hands. So we have to, really work hard to try to keep the engagement and focus on what 2021 can be like, even with all the unknowns. So I guess, Jeff, from my perspective, it's required us to be nimble, much more proactive, out of the box thinking. And frankly, we've also had to keep the morale of our staff in check, because this has been a brutal year, not only for the Brewers, but for every business, for the country, for society. We're the entertainment business. We're not, Kelly Joe's people are saving lives every day. We know our place in the community. We entertain. We're not the priority, but from our perspective, you want to make sure our employees feel good and are motivated and recognize we've got a lot of work to do in the next few months and years ahead to sort of re-engage our fan base.
Okay, I just want to have a follow-up. Do you think there's any possibility of fans being in the stands for playoffs, even like a limited number?
Yeah, I think probably unlikely. And the reason I say that is we're rapidly approaching the last month of the regular season, and given the health protocols in place, and given Major League Baseball's concerns about making sure that we get the season completed, I think it's probably unrealistic to think we'll have fans in the stands. As far as the postseason, first of all, I want to be part of the postseason. We have expanded playoffs, but I want to be there. I will be playing games meaningfully in October. I'm never going to say never, but I think candidly, Jeff, I would say the odds are long that we actually have fans in the stands for games in baseball in 2020 in Miller Park.
Yeah, let me go to Kelly Jo Golson now, the Chief Marketing Officer for Advocate Aurora Health. Kelly Jo, what do you think? What have you learned, or what has your organization learned from things like Major League Baseball starting up and schools trying to reopen? Because all that comes back on the health system.
Right. I mean, when it comes specifically to baseball, I would just say that um, we've just really valued our relationship with the Brewers, and I think a lot of people have questioned of, well, what's the real value in a time of COVID? I mean, you don't have fans in the stadium, and I would say that it's really underscored the importance of why you truly partner and what partnership is about. When we started approaching, things started to unravel in early March. We have 75,000 team members across Advocate Aurora. We had truly these healthcare heroes that were kind of running into the fire when we were all retreating into our homes. And we really reached out to the Brewers and just saying, this is when you can use the power of your megaphone to do something bigger than baseball. And I just want to thank Rick and the team. If they were just such great partners of how can we help you? How can we help save lives? How can we help educate? So I think we've begun to look at partnership completely different. We certainly have been, whether it's schools being back in session, whether it's folks, fans being back in the stands. I think it's something that we continue to partner with our experts, with the infectious disease, with the CDC, and the safety and health of our community and our neighbors comes first. And so I think, one of the challenges is we've all seen is the news and the angles continue to shift so frequently. From masking to PPE to testing to treatment. And I think we've all just had to learn to be agile.
Tim, I want to move to you about, in terms of the economic impact of Miller Park and Major League Baseball. You folks did a study not that long ago in which you said that the Brewers in Miller Park have had a $2.5 billion economic impact in Wisconsin over 2 decades. And this year, I guess, is an example of what happens when that economic development isn't fully felt. So what are your metrics for success for this short season, economic development wise, and your hopes for next season in the economic development?
Yeah, I mean, to make a long story short, I mean, as you asked the question, I can't help but think back to October 6, 1995 at 4:54 in the morning. And I know it because I was sitting there with Senator Petak before he walked out on the floor to make the vote to ultimately start the process of building Miller Park. And this community went through a long discussion about why do we need a new stadium, where will it be, and how will it be funded? And looking back today, 20 years now, and seeing the $2.5 billion, what I call but-for economic impact. This is the money that was generated, the revenue that was generated that wouldn't have been generated without Major League Baseball, the 1,800 jobs on average that are there. And when I think about that, I think about the impact that this team has, not only economically, but culturally to the community. And so I think it's been a great story. And it's not a story just about Milwaukee. Only 38% of the attendees come from Milwaukee County. The rest come here from out around the rest of the state and from outside the state. And so when you think about that, it's really been a great story. And as Rick knows really well, I mean, after that first year of Miller Park, attendance jumped 80%. And I think I'm sure we're in the bottom 10 of major league markets, and yet our attendance is in the top 10. So I think it's been a very successful story underpinned by the economic impact that we outlined in the study.
So what are isn't this like, though, this is what would have happened to everybody if we didn't have Major League Baseball this year in terms of the economic impact. This isn't how we want this to happen, but here's a stark contrast. Hey, this is what it'd be like.
Yeah, it is. And Rick and I talked about this a couple of months ago at a press conference, is that, and I wouldn't call this a silver lining, but if you want to know what it looks like without baseball, here it is. And if you look at the impact on the fans, the impact on the businesses, the purchasing, all the things that go on around a baseball game, people coming in from out state, people making their vacations around this. So you can really see the stark contrast of not having baseball in a community and having baseball. So I'm hopeful we get back to it soon, not just from the perspective of having a brat and a beer at the ballpark, but what it means to this community and the ability to bring, as we're talking about this topic, diverse numbers of the community together in one place to celebrate something we all recognize.
Rick, you mentioned, back to Rick, you mentioned before about your economic models all going out the window. But I mean, what are your metrics? What are your adjusted metrics for success in terms of, all your part-time employees, the community, the baseball community? What are your metrics for success, or how do you even measure it during these times?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at, how do we mitigate, the millions of dollars of losses that we're having. And I think, the reality is our ownership group is much more forward thinking. They don't, Mark Antanasio doesn't obsess about any specific year or any specific line item in our financials. He looks at, the organization, holistically and on 10-year sort of timeline. So, he keeps reminding me, don't be despairing over the financial picture for 2020. Think long term, and that's why, from our perspective, if we're playing good baseball, if we can get our hitters to start hitting, and we make the postseason, and we have, we bring some joy to the community, that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad way to look at success. I think what we need in 2020 is joy. And there's nothing wrong with people saying, look to baseball and look at just the live sports for some excitement and something optimistic. The Bucks are hopefully on a historic run to the NBA title, and we'd like to be on their heels and get a run to the World Series, even in a weird year where we have a 60-game schedule and likely no fans. I'll still take the World Series ring associated with winning it. But this year is not a metric over financials. It's a measure and a metric over our brand, over our fan engagement, and frankly, at the end of the day, bringing some joy to our community and our state.
I'm glad you have a good boss who recognizes all of that. Okay, back to Kelly Jo. Kelly Jo, you circulate in the business community, and you're have a great partnership with the Brewers. I mean, how do you think your fellow members of the business community think about the Brewers and their key to being part of Milwaukee?
Well, I think, I don't think that there was ever a doubt, but I think that Tim phrased it well, that if there's I hate to even call it a silver line, but if there was ever any awareness of the value that the Brewers provide for this community, certainly economically, it's now. Because once it's gone, I think that that's one of the things that COVID has taught us about so many things, is that some of the things perhaps we took for granted, once they're gone or once they're compromised, I think it really comes to light. So I think that there's no doubt. I think everyone is really anxious and eager of how we can get the doors to that park back open and get the fans back in there. But I also think I see the business community really rallying around to say, absent that, what else can we do? What does our new normal look like? How can we bring baseball to fans in a different way? We've done some great things with player experiences, via Zoom that perhaps we weren't doing before. We took what used to be the Aurora bullpen and we converted that to home runs for heroes. So now we're using that airtime to recognize those heroes that are out there saving lives. So I think the business community is really rallying around and trying to be agile and be solution oriented, and then really looking forward to when we have this behind us.
Okay, so let me just move on to some audience questions, and then we can again, for those of you who are watching via the webinar platform, you can ask a question through the chat function at the bottom of your screen. So you can type in the question, and then I'll be able to see it, and I'll try to work it in this last half hour here. So I think this is for you, Rick, this question. How do you expect your business strategy and staffing to change following 2020? specifically related to safety protocols, in-person and virtual interaction with ticket holders.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the things we're trying to figure out is you know, how much of what COVID has done to our, you know, protocols is going to be a permanent part of our landscape, and how much of it is hopefully, you know, unique to a pandemic that we hopefully don't have to see for another 100 years. But we are looking with Major League Baseball at a number of things we're trying to do to the ballpark. Some of these will be changes to the ballpark that we're going to have to fund. Some are going to be different ways we do things, such as you know, more digital ticketing, less, you know, human contact. So we're going to try to figure out how we can ingress and egress, you know, 44,000 people at every game in a more efficient way that has less human contact, simply because this is sort of our, as Kelly Jo mentioned, is sort of potentially a new normal. And even if we are, by some miracle, have a vaccine and we're able to arrest the situation, I think there are going to be lingering impacts that people's mindsets are changing about what, you know, used to be very commonplace. You know, I don't know if we're ever going to get back to handshaking. So we know we need to do some things. The concession operations are going to have to undergo changes. You know, we don't know if we're going to have full stands in 2021. We're certainly hopeful that we can return to that kind of normal. But if there is restrictions on how many fans we can have, we have to put in those protocols in place. And I can tell you, we have a lot of season ticket holders, a lot of people want to buy tickets. And if there are restrictions, we're going to have to do some kind of lottery system and you know, parcel out things. And it's not what I want to do. I want to be able to have a seat for everybody that wants one. But in 2021, we're just going to have to, again, be nimble and be practical. We have 29 other teams going through the same thing. We have, you know, football teams, NBA arenas, all going through the same analysis. So we're all sharing data and trying to come up with best practices. But, you know, the stadium will have different protocols for sure in 2021. I can tell you that. Specifically, remains to be seen what those look like.
Yeah, now MLB did it differently, right? NBA's in the bubble. Other sports leagues around the world have, you know, created a bubble or a couple bubbles, and Major League Baseball did it differently. And you know, you had kind of a rough start. I mean, you know, I think the St. Louis Cardinals have had among the roughest starts. But I mean, you had to have learned something from all of that, right? I mean, every day is a lesson, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't sure. There was a lot of reasons why Major League Baseball did not take the bubble approach. I mean, we frankly need a lot of fields, you know, and we just have a lot of different players. We have bigger staffs, and it's hard to find one location that could frankly accommodate, you know, 15 games being played on a daily basis. So the decision was made to come up with protocols and play in home ballparks. And frankly, you know, Jeff, I think there was sort of a hope that we could see fans in the stands. When we came up with the bubble approach in frankly May, you know, there was still a hope that maybe later in the summer we could have some fans in the stands, and certainly that was a driver to try to have games being played at home ballparks. Now, and obviously in retrospect, that doesn't look like that's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, we're learning lessons about the nature of this you know, pandemic. I think, frankly, the country is learning lessons, and sometimes we're not necessarily learning the right lessons, but it just shows you that, you know, smart people can have very different views on this. And in a country where we have a lot of different states and different views from state governors, you're seeing a lot of different approaches, and we're trying to navigate, you know, different protocols, being the fact that baseball is played in, you know, basically 20 different states.
All right, I want to move to Tim, because I think this question is basically in your arena. This is an audience question. How will the inability to open Miller Park to the public this year and other sports facilities in the city impact the Milwaukee and the economy? I guess not to mention the tax revenues too. I mean, it's going to have a hit on a lot of fronts, right, Tim?
You know, absolutely. And I just, you know, back to the economic impact, you know, I think about 600 million in taxes have been collected to fund Miller Park. But as another part of that, the team has generated about 263 million in taxes And a big chunk of that revenue comes from players and visiting players playing here. So, you know, that's certainly one part of it. I think the bigger challenge for all of us, whether it's a baseball team, a hospital, a restaurant, is restoring two things: consumer confidence and employee confidence. And until those two return, the economic impacts are going to continue to ripple through our economy. So you think of the employee confidence, wanting to come back to work or wanting to come back to a ballpark and have an environment that's safe, and everybody is making changes. Some of those are going to be permanent. And so it's hard to see if employers are now moving into maybe their first quarter of 2021 before their employees come back to work. Those challenges are going to ripple through the rest of the economy. I spoke to an event last night in Ozaukee County, and there were a number of companies that were absent because if they go to an event with more than 3 people, they've got to get senior management approval for it. So those are going to continue to track as we deal with COVID. And then, you know, consumer confidence goes hand in hand. And so those are the things I think we have to work on if we're going to see a return to whatever the next normal is in a ballpark or in a business.
Can you speculate a little bit on what the impact for local government financing is? Because, you know, all the services that businesses depend upon, residents depend upon, if the tax take from just the Brewers isn't coming through and the Bucks isn't coming through, I mean, that's got to put a hole in the budgets.
Oh, there's no question. And if you think about this just in 3 quick bites here, you go back to March, the beginning of the pandemic, and the Metro Milwaukee area had about 870,000 people employed. Unemployment was at 3.2%. And the biggest challenge in front of everybody was finding people for unfilled job openings. By the middle, if we go to April or May, the region had lost about 111,000 jobs. Unemployment had jumped to 13.6%. We've now recovered probably half of those 111,000 jobs. Unemployment's under 10%. But that is a recognition of the challenges that businesses have had in terms of furloughing and laying people off. So as you and I watch this, Jeff, going into the next budget session, both at a local and state level, I think we're going to see some of the biggest challenges in funding state government and local governments we've seen in you know, the last 25 years.
I want to bring in Kelly Jo about this. You know, hospitals have been under stress, obviously, during this time, and have lost millions of dollars because you know, their routines were upset. Certainly, what's the situation with Advocate Aurora?
So, you know, I think Tim just hit it just spot on. The consumer confidence, it's really key. I think the first inclination when the numbers started to rapidly climb on COVID were for folks to step back, for some of the routine non-urgent procedures to be delayed. But I think that it's been very clear, and our physicians are telling us that there's a real risk of folks not seeking care when they need it. We're seeing a higher incidence of cardiac episodes. Think about the preventative screenings of cancers aren't caught early. So really regaining that consumer confidence and getting folks back in, seek care when you need care is such a critical, important message. Else we're going to be paying for this for years down the road. And I'm not even talking about monetary pain. I'm talking about with individuals' health and well-being. So at Advocate Aurora, we launched our Safe Care Promise, and it really is a 5-point plan to protect and regain the confidence of not only our patients, but also our team members, our workforce. And it's everything from screenings, virtual check-ins, our appointments are spaced out. We're really moving to that contactless episodes of care whenever possible. But I think that that's really, really critical for us of making sure that patients who need care are seeking care.
Okay, I want to remind the audience that's in the webinar platform right now, you can type a question into your chat function at the bottom of the screen, and then I can try to relay the question to the right person. I think this one's for you, Rick, or it's in your arena. I don't know whether you can speak for the players, But you know, the Bucks players were very adamant about action on policy changes. And this questioner asked, would Brewers players be willing to come to the state capitol and testify at some type of public hearing on questions of racism and racial justice?
Yeah, I know what the Bucks players were talking about, and yeah, it's probably hard for me to speak for individual players in terms of their proclivities or interest in doing that. There are some players like in society as a whole. Some players are very outspoken and comfortable in that environment. Others are not, and may be a surprise, but these athletes have no problem performing at elite level in front of millions of people on television, but the thought of public speaking is something they shy away from, and I get that. I don't have a problem public speaking, but I can't play baseball, so everybody's got different skill sets. I think what we started out in this dialogue was politics and sports and athletes becoming more comfortable, willing to speak out on issues. And I do think that's going to mean that some athletes are going to be comfortable and not only willing, but motivated to take a more active role in talking to elected officials and becoming spokespeople for issues. We're seeing that in other leagues. So I think, baseball, the players have traditionally been less maybe active, less vocal. And we're seeing a shift, and we're seeing, our players locally taking a position here, an extraordinary position of actually not playing in a game for over a sort of a societal political issue. This is not because of a work stoppage or a weather issue. This is, a voluntary decision by athletes to say, we're not going to play because there's a larger societal issue that we want to focus on. It's not a big leap from that to have players actually take a more active role. Individual decisions, of course. And from my perspective, at the Brewers, we recognize and respect any decision the players make, whether to be active or behind the scenes, whatever the level of comfort is.
Okay. Tim, I want to go to you now and go take a trip down memory lane. You said you noted Senator Petak, his crucial vote. And we think of all the controversies. Miller Park was born in controversy and has come to really be embraced. I think for everybody upstate or outstate who boards a bus on a day, they want to know that they can go to the game, right? They don't have a problem with that. So, take us, I guess, a little bit through, that controversy. It's centered on the regional tax. And in retrospect, that tax has just been retired. So in retrospect, was that the right way to go?
I think so. And here's why I say that. There was a lot of discussion about, again, the need for a new park, where it was going to be. We went through an exhaustive effort to get a statewide sports lottery on the ballot, which was one way to fund this. That didn't work out. And so when we came down to it, even though it's a statewide team, I think the 0.1% sales tax was a way to gather revenue from folks who were coming down here to the ballpark. And I think in hindsight, it's turned out to be a very equitable way to fund Miller Park. And so as we look back on it, and interestingly enough, when we look at the lessons of Miller Park and what's happened, and I'll just kind of cite the roughly 17 million in tax revenue that comes from the Brewer payroll each year to state coffers. That kernel of evidence was what we really used to leverage financing the investment in Fiserv Forum. Because if you don't have the Brewers playing here, a lot of arguments about the economic impact and how much of it is replacing another expense that would have occurred. But one of the things that's very clear is the roughly 17 million in income tax revenue that the state collects from Major League Baseball, they wouldn't collect if the Brewers, if we didn't build the Miller Park and the Brewers weren't playing here. So if you think about Fiserv Forum, that argument about using the revenue from the payroll of the Bucks is really what's financing the debt service on Fiserv Forum. And so again, looking back over 20 years, I'm never going to convince somebody who thinks that you shouldn't put any money into ballpark that this was a good idea, but by and large, I think the general public, reflective in the attendance, reflective in the experience, the 0.1% sales tax was the way to go in terms of financing Miller Park.
Rick, I got to go back to you on this. You know, the Miller Park it was promised to translate into success on the field, and then it did. And I think a lot of us were like, "Wow, it really worked." So, I mean, since Miller Park has come into existence, the Brewers have literally been more competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's always easy for people to criticize, you know, government and spending. And there's certainly many examples of mismanaged projects funded by the government. But, you know, I think this is a you know, testimonial to a great public-private partnership. You know, the state of Wisconsin and the citizens made a courageous decision to keep the Brewers in Milwaukee, to build a retractable stadium that is the envy of many teams, including my brethren in Minneapolis and Pittsburgh and Chicago and Detroit. I'm sitting here when it's snowing and we have a game and it's 70 degrees inside, and they're trying to figure out how they get their games played in snowstorms. And frankly, the ballpark attendance, you know, from an average of 1.5 million at County Stadium to about 2.6 million in Miller Park, and in the last 3 years, over 2.8 million. That money goes directly to player payroll, which is really the lifeblood of how you field competitive teams. And, you know, we have not always won a lot of games. There's been some years here at Miller Park that have not been good, but last 2 years we've been in the postseason. We're trying to make it 3 years in a row. We just signed Christian Yelich to a long-term contract, so we're trying to keep our core stars. Absolutely, from many measurements, objective measurements, I think you have to look and say the decision to fund and build Miller Park was an extraordinarily successful foresight, took courage, and it's paid off handsomely for the fans, for the Brewers, and for the state of Wisconsin.
And Jeff, just to kind of pile on that statement that Rick made, if you really look at the added expense of the roof, and I think Rick would validate this, the Brewers have play in the smallest metro area. So they draw more of their attendance from outside the metro than any other team. And so it's really to the benefit of the fans around the state who drive down here with the assurance that there's going to be a game in comfortable position. And I think that was a critical part of making this whole package so successful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too negative, but I remember reporting on the problems with the roof, and it's like, wow, is that going to work? And then it has been working, but working for many years. I've been there when it was going to rain or is raining, it closes, stuff continues. So, and it is, if you're not living in Milwaukee, it's a great assurance to be able to say, well, I know a game's going to be played today. I'm going to make the drive. And it's of course good to have a good parking lot for tailgating, not to mention that. Okay, I want to go to Kelly Jo about your perspective on, as a sponsor in terms of the Brewers and the success of Miller Park.
So, just incredibly positive. The way that we assess all of our partners is really twofold. One is we really are looking for those iconic brands that can give our brand a lift. Those brands that we have similar belief, core values, that together we can connect, and ultimately it will lift our brand as well. But the other key commitment we have that we look for with our partners is a brand that shares our commitment to together improve our community. And we have seen that with the Brewers, with fans in the stadium, without fans in the stadium, we have seen that. And so we absolutely value, we're going into our year 3 as serving as the official healthcare partner for the Brewers, and certainly see this as a long time in our future of just a partnership that has not only improved our brand, but frankly has really made an impact on the community. So obviously we're very anxious to get Miller Park open. We certainly have a lot of activations on our assets that take place in that stadium. And so we're anxious to do that as well, but we continue to see value, again, for our own brand, but I think more importantly for our communities.
So we're coming down to the closing minutes here, and I want to sort of ask a question that could maybe serve as a closing statement. It doesn't necessarily have to, and I'm going to start with you, Kelly Jo. In terms of, I think the bottom line seems to be once the once the coronavirus is tamed, or then things can get back to normal, but really not before. And I'm wondering, what's your opinion of that? And then what's your best case scenario here? From where you sit in a big health organization, what's the best case scenario going forward here for Major League Baseball and big crowd activities?
So, I think that Rick was suggesting earlier, of really trying to assess with those safety measures that we're putting in place today, how many of those in a non-COVID world will we bring forward? I will tell you at Advocate Aurora, we believe this is our new world that we're going to be dealing with, not only until a vaccine is discovered, but once that vaccine is discovered, it has to be manufactured, it has to be distributed. I mean, there has to be a widespread adherence. So I think this is our new world. Now, we do believe, in partnership with our infectious disease experts, that we can find a way to safely navigate. We can find a way to get back into the stadium. But, let me say this is my personal belief, is I think it's going to look a lot different than it did in the 2019 season for some time. I think we'll get back in those stadiums. We'll get back into the seats. But I think how we do it, whether it's that we've got screenings going on before people enter the stadium, perhaps the seats are a little bit more spread out. As Rick mentioned, we go much more to ticketless. Food service looks a little bit different. I do think that the world of a fan experience is likely forever altered.
Okay. Rick, why don't you reflect on the best case scenario? Do you think going forward in terms of the best case scenario? I guess is still next season, but you kind of answered this before. But what are your hopes? Your realistic hopes?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kelly Jo's right. I think the reality is certain things are going to be a permanent part of our landscape, and even if we have a vaccine, and it's going to require a lot of attention, a lot of thoughtful, deliberate thinking on mass gatherings, and both Tim and Kelly Jo hit on this. Consumer confidence. We need fans to feel comfortable in mass gatherings, and there are going to be areas where those are going to be a mandatory situation. There's going to be times when people are going to have to be in mass gatherings, not because of a choice, but because of society. Going to a baseball game is always going to be a choice. We have a lot of fans, and some of them are diehards, and would rather go to the baseball game than anything else. But the reality is, it's still a volitional activity, and we need people to feel comfortable. And it's incumbent on us as an organization to do everything we can to make people comfortable. We also, have to be in lockstep with health officials and with our elected officials. And there is confusion because different jurisdictions have different views, and some communities may be more aggressive than others. My philosophy is I want, people to feel that this is safe. I want people to feel comfortable. I don't want to be motivated by commercial means to do something that in retrospect is not going to be successful, or would be viewed as reckless, or viewed as not sensitive to what's going on in our community. I am optimistic long-term that mass gatherings and baseball games will be able to go back to full attendance, whether that's next year or the year after. I'm certainly doing a lot of financial models, which probably 90% of them will have to go back to the waste paper basket again. Or in the digital space of Control Alt Delete, wherever that is. But I'm optimistic long term, and again, our ownership shares that view. So as much as I have sleepless nights over 2021, the reality is we're in this for the long haul, and frankly, our partners really respect it and get it, and our fans get it, and so we're going to figure it out, and even if it's not 2021, we'll figure it out, and we'll have full stands at some point.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Tim, what's your best? MMAC was really at the forefront of exploring the dangers of the coronavirus. You had Dr. John Raymond, the head of the Medical College of Wisconsin, briefing your members regularly on this, and really raising the alarm bells about what the effect could be. So I'm wondering, what's your best case scenario for large gatherings? Because you know, yeah, we're talking about the Brewers, but you know, there's also Summerfest and soccer and all kinds of sporting events and entertainment events. So what's your best case scenario going forward?
Yeah, maybe the best answer, Jeff, is just to respond to this as an individual. And I think it's true of the experiences I'm having right now. If I go out to eat at a restaurant and I don't feel comfortable with the experience, if the tables are too close, people aren't wearing masks, and I think, you know, I'm putting myself at risk or somebody in my family at risk, I'm not going to repatriate that restaurant. And so the challenge with every business, Rick's included, is I show up at the ballpark. You know, do I feel comfortable in that setting? If I do, and I feel like they're doing the best job to take care of me, people around me are acting like that, then I'm likely to re-engage. If not, I'm not going to do that. And I think this is an uncomfortable area for employers as they start to look ahead and bring people back to work in an office setting. Nobody wants to get into what your employees are doing on a weekend or outside of work, but with COVID, that comes back into the business. So the messaging that I'm hearing from companies, again, is that the experiences you're having outside of work are going to affect the health of our workplace, and we really want you to think about that. And so if a company says, look, I don't want you going to a gathering with more than X number of people until those caps start to lift and people feel more comfortable, it's going to impact, I think, everybody trying to attract the consumer to their location. So I think there's going to be a little give and take, but bottom line here is if people are feeling comfortable in the experience, they're going to engage in it. If they're not, they're going to do something else. They're going to stay home. They're going to watch on TV. And I think we're all going to be subject to that kind of influence.
Well, that was a realistic assessment, Tim, but yeah, I mean, my personal hope is that it happens sooner rather than later. But, you know, I think the middle of next year, we may have to wait until the middle of next year before there's real clarity on this. So I think that brings us to the end of the discussion. I want to thank all the people who attended through the webinar or are viewing on our YouTube channel. I want to thank our sponsors, of course, University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee, Waggett, 1125 at Pabst, Bridge and Build, Milwaukee Police Association, the Firm Consulting, and Medical College of Wisconsin and Spectrum. So this is Jeff Mayers. I want to thank our panelists. Couldn't have done it without you, obviously. Rick Schlesinger, president of the business operations for the Milwaukee Brewers. Rick, good luck with the rest of the season, and I hope the bats come alive. Tim Sheehy, president of MMAC. Kelly Jo Golson, chief marketing officer, Advocate Aurora Health. So I'm Jeff Mayers from WisPolitics.com and WisBusiness.com. You can see our calendar of events at WisPolitics.com. And signing off for the time being, and we'll see you at our next event. Thanks, everybody.